In our analysis of The Birth of a Nation, we're first going to examine how Griffith creates disempowered characters that are going to become an object of sympathy. Now, it may seem ridiculous that Southern plantation owners who up until recently owned slaves, who have money and political power, could possibly be reworked as sort of disempowered characters that are going to be oppressed. But that's exactly what Griffith is going to do in the scenes that we are about to examine. Now, Griffith is first going to depict the policy of emancipation as promulgated by the radical Senator Stoneman in the North. The scenes we are watching right now are taking place shortly after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The man that is bowing and scraping before the Senator Stoneman is a mulatto named Silas Lynch. Now, he is going to be the outer facade of freed blacks. Meanwhile, Stoneman's mulatto serving girl in this scene is portraying the inner quality of the freed and equal blacks, while Silas acts in a dignified fashion as he meets the other senators. The serving girl, who is a mulatto as well, is going to behave inappropriately. We are going to begin to see cracks in the social order. This is, of course, going to foreshadow what's going to happen later on when Reconstruction happens in the South. Notice that Senator Sumner is still waiting in the parlor to be admitted to see Stoneman, while Silas Lynch is hobnobbing with the rest of the politicians. He is finally going to be able to come in and see Stoneman, and he's going to urge a less dangerous policy, as our placard is going to tell us. The eroticization of the servant girl here is also seen in other parts of the movie. There's a dangerous sexuality attached to the blacks throughout this entire movie. Stoneman is not going to listen to the counsel of Senator Sumner, however. And as his gregarious gestures indicate, he rejects it. Griffith is going to first show us the disempowering of the Southern whites through their disenfranchisement at the ballot box. Pay attention to how the first voter in this scene is going to vote. There he puts one ballot in the box, and he puts another ballot in the box. Not only are the Southern whites being disenfranchised in this scene, but Griffith takes great pains to show us that the freed Southern blacks cannot possibly accept or fully understand the new gift of democracy that they have. And of course, with the unfair balloting practices, the Negroes and the carpetbaggers sweep the state. Of course, Griffith emphasizes that the Northerners who advocate radical Reconstruction are not doing so truly for the benefit of the freed Southern blacks, but are instead a form of race traitors in and of themselves. The election of Silas Lynch as lieutenant governor is also going to signal more hardships upon the Southern whites. For he is not going to be a mere pawn of anyone else, but he is going to specifically try and gain more and more power from himself in an unethical fashion, and at the expense of whites. Notice how even as the Southern blacks celebrate their victory at the polls, the Southern whites wear forlorn expressions as they wonder what's going to happen to them in the future. These expressions mirror ones that they have on their faces when Lincoln's assassination was announced. And notice that with the political power Lynch has achieved, he is aspiring to love a woman beyond his station. This is going to be a consistent theme as we roll over to our next segment of the film, the legislative session after the first election. Now, whether or not this is actually a historical facsimile of what happened in the legislative session of 1871 is not relevant to our discussion today. Griffith twisting the facts is less important than in the ways in which he is portraying the characters in question. Now, as we watch this scene, pay attention to two parallel things at the same time. Pay attention to the behavior of the freed black legislators, but also pay attention to the facial expressions and behavior of the white minority in the legislature house. Take notice that the black legislators in the room behave in a sort of perpetual saturnalia of the kind that Kingsley invokes in his novel At Last. But these racist depictions of the freed blacks operating in the legislature are going to pale in comparison to the policies they're going to enact. Policies that are going to be visually shown to disempower the whites. As the legislature motions to adopt new policies, pay close attention to the music that is being played. It's your audio clue that something is very amiss. This particular motion is one way in which the Southern whites will be disempowered. The helpless white minority. Notice that they are helpless, even as this minority of white legislators are sitting in their own legislature. They are shown as visibly disempowered, as well as the white visitors in the gallery up in the top floor. Notice the leering of the black men in the legislature with the two white women on the balcony. Now, of course, intermarriage of blacks and whites is really code for rape, because this movie postulates that no white woman would ever want to date a black man. With no way to legally affect the outcome of this process, the whites leave the legislature, while the blacks celebrate. As Silas congratulates his fellow politicians, the legislature breaks out in a sort of party atmosphere. This demonstrates on Griffith's part that not only are the whites being unfairly disempowered, but that rule by the blacks is going to be a very bad thing. Unjust, if you will. Now, when watching these next scenes, we need to keep in mind that behaviors we would see as just typical in a society where there is a substantial racial equality are going to be looked down upon as both improper and immoral. Now, Silas is talking pleasantly with Elsie, and while we might not see anything wrong with this particular setup, it is a clear violation of social norms and codes in the Old South, as evidenced by Ben Cameron's disapproving expression. But the white Southerners have no legal method to redress any of these grievous offenses which they are witness to. As much as Stowe will complain that slaves have no legal standing before the courts, so too here will Griffith argue that the white Southerners have no legal standing before their own courts anymore, as in this scene. Notice that Griffith takes advantage of the inability of silent film to convey substantial dialogue, so that he doesn't have to tell us what the charges are in this particular case, what the case is about, or anything that's going on. We simply witness a black magistrate, an all-black jury, ruling in favor of a black man. Notice that this white family is being removed from the home with nothing but the clothes upon their back. Even the aged male patriarch of the family is being hustled along despite his infirmity.